Okay, it looks like we are live. I see it on YouTube. I see it on Facebook. Yeah, for sure. And it is actually happening. Excellent. Welcome to the pre-chat, where we just verify that things are going on. Maybe have a casual conversation about whatever's on your mind. Nothing crazy. You know, it's a great day. It's a beautiful day in Morgan Hill. I had to do a little running around this morning, and I was stunned at how beautiful it was. And it's one of those mornings where you would swear you should be rolling down your windows, putting down that convertible top if you've got one, or opening the sunroof, just because it's so beautiful. Clear skies, sunshine, freezing out there. So just enjoy the visual of how wonderful it is in Morgan Hill this morning, because it was frickin' freezing when I was out there today. But it was one of those things where the overall was also awesome. Which is, I don't know, that sounds odd, but the vibe, right? So I get in the car. I have to go run an errand, a work-related errand. I could go check out a property real quick. And then, of course, I have to get coffee, right? This is Coffee and Real Estate. And you know what? We're not live on Facebook. There we go. Now we're live on Facebook. So as I was saying, welcome to it. If you're just joining us from Facebook, just talking about what a beautiful day it is here in Morgan Hill today, and it's one of those deceiving kinds of beautiful mornings where the sunshine, the clear sky, everything looks great, and you roll down your window and it's like 38 degrees and everything starts to freeze inside your car. So closed all those windows up. But the whole vibe was awesome because I jumped in the car. And do any of you just have different songs that it's not even that they're good songs. It's just that every time they come on, they either make you laugh or smile. So I've got a couple of those. One is from Electric Six, and it's called Danger High Voltage. And I think why it makes me laugh every time it comes on, because I remember seeing the music video way back in the olden days, and it is just a crack up, right? And then the other band that tends to always make me laugh out loud is Aqua, just because it's so absurd and crazy, over the top, sickening, sweet kind of stuff. Both of those songs came on right as I'm driving down the hill to go check out Morgan Hill. So it was a great morning. I was laughing the whole way down the hill. I hope your day is starting off as well. I hope everybody's got plans for the weekend, aside from just hanging out with me for an hour or more. I think we've got some interesting stuff to cover today. I was always saying that January was going to be an interesting month because in past years, we've seen the markets kind of do an unusually interesting jump in January. We'll see if that's happened this month. February is going to also be annoying, possibly annoying, but amazing or interesting. As we move closer and closer to when things are supposed to get hotter, February has also been a month that we've tended to see things ramp up. So everybody fasten your seatbelt. I think we're going to see some, sadly, what's that old, is it a Chinese curse or a Japanese curse? May you live in interesting times, because it looks like we are going to. And there's also I've got some interesting news items from the national level that could affect us. So we've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, plus whatever you guys bring to the table. As always, I am happy to cover any subjects you guys want to hit. Let me just make sure the chat is working. With a big old welcome to Coffee and Real Estate. And let me try one from, unfortunately, Facebook is its own thing, right? So if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and chat. You can chat all you like. I do have that window open. The only other two places I believe I will see chats coming in are from Twitch and YouTube. So if you're watching on LinkedIn or Twitter, I will not be able to see those, but I will get little ping alerts, I believe, if you chat at me directly on Twitter. So if I do not respond immediately to you and you're on one of those two platforms, I apologize. Once the show's over, I'll review any messages that I've gotten, because I also have WhatsApp up so that you can chat to me directly using that. But I'm not monitoring that one. My brain only has two tracks for chats. One for Facebook, one for the mix of YouTube and Twitch. So apologies if I miss you. But I will get back to you. And I do like answering questions during the show, because that way everyone benefits from your question and from the exploration of the answer. But I realize the reality is sometimes I can't do that. But I promise anyone who leaves a comment, sends me a message, I will respond and try to give you whatever information that you need to move forward. I hope everyone has a cup of coffee this morning. I'm feeling particularly energetic today. I'm not really sure why. Well, maybe I do know why. So here's something else we could chat about, which has absolutely nothing to do with real estate. And you're always wondering if you're sharing too much. Like, who cares, right? I'm not one of those people that tweets what I'm having for lunch and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, who really cares, right? However, I started a weight loss program in the first week of November, and as of a couple of days ago, I have lost 50 pounds on this program. And it is the most... It's gotten me over hurdles I haven't been over in a very, very long time. So I'm super excited about it. And maybe my additional energy is just another side effect of losing weight. But because I'll tell you what, whatever you want to say about body positivity, nothing feels better than dropping weight. Everything in your life gets better. All kinds of things I never would have guessed would get better losing weight have gotten better. So if you're out there suffering from overweightedness and you're really wanting to drop those pounds, I can't come up with a better system than the one I've sort of bought into. And unfortunately, it's a very local thing, right? So if you're somewhere else in the country, this may not work for you. It's called Jumpstart MD, and they are not paying me a dime. In fact, I shovel tons of money to them every month for this program. But it absolutely works, 100%. Again, no one's paying me. No advertising dollars are being spent with them on me. Just take this as someone who's using their system that has seen awesome results so far. I mean, because that's only 4 months, 50 pounds in 4 months. Pretty good, right? So I'm more than halfway through my goal weight loss on this, and I couldn't be more excited about it, and it's great. So everything's going wonderfully. And if you go look at the Jumpstart MD thing, it very much has medicines in it. So let's say you've been talking, and this is particularly something I would suggest for folks who have been talking to their doctors, and these doctors are suggesting procedures that involve you getting cut open, right? Or getting your stomach stapled, or getting things cut and reattached. Definitely try this before you do that. And it's all medicine-based. I think that the primary stuff that is working for me is some of the prescription medications that are involved. But my feeling is you don't need Jumpstart MD in order to do this. You could talk to your doctor and say, hey, listen, why don't you prescribe to me Contrave, and what's the other one? I can't remember the name of the other one. But I also have a thing called Wegovy, which is a weekly subcutaneous shot that I give myself. It's Contrave, and I can't remember the name of the other one. But talk to your doctor about it, and because if they just prescribe this stuff to you, you'll benefit from it. I mean, you don't have to go in. I go in every week, and I get weighed, and we have a chat and all that kind of wonderful stuff. But my feeling is you could just go to your doctor and make an appeal to them to do something like that instead of getting cut open. So I'll see if I can't remember. Maybe on Jumpstart MD, it actually says the names of the medications. I think it does. Contrave is the big one. Well, Wegovy is the big one. If you can get Wegovy, that's kind of amazing. But if your insurance doesn't cover it, it's $1,800 a month. So not something I'm willing to pay that much for. Let's see. Let's see here. I'm not seeing a specific mention of the drugs that they use. Well, anyway. So it's Contrave and Metformin. That's the other one. Contrave and Metformin plus Wegovy. But Wegovy is just a product name, right? It's a supraglutide or something like that. So if you just Google supraglutide, let me Google it and make sure I'm not steering you the wrong way. I'm saying it wrong. It's something like that. Wegovy is the one I take, but there's like two others. Semaglutide, that's what it is. Semaglutide. So those three things together. In fact, they didn't approve my prescription for the semaglutide until I'd been doing the other thing for a month, and I lost a ton of weight with just those two medications I originally mentioned, the metformin and the Contrave. So if you can do just metformin and Contrave, and my insurance pays for one, and I think I pay $25 a month for the other one, you will definitely start losing weight. It calls for a little bit of a change to your eating habits. You need to cut out the carbs and you need to cut out sugar, but it's amazing. I've increased my activity level a bit, but it's nothing painful, and it works amazingly. So there you go. There's the non-real estate tidbit for this month, for those of you who are in a position where you really need to lose some weight. And you will be, whatever else is going on in your life, maybe it's rashes, maybe, I don't know what it could be, all kinds of different things. You are going to discover that as you lose weight, those things go away. Because, fat is inflammation. You're retaining all these fluids and stuff. So, yeah, and just for your own health, right? Just so you can enjoy life more. I hope that helps. All the stats are looking good on the stream. Man, it's amazing. I think this is the first stream in a long time where nothing is screwed up. Last month, we had a scenario where I accidentally clicked a button I shouldn't have clicked, and we dropped off of Facebook. So I had to reconnect to Facebook, which then wasn't associated with the scheduled event. So it was still there on the page, but anyway, don't want to jinx it. Everything's going great today. We are coming up on 10 o'clock when we officially start. I hope all of you are going to have some amazing weekend plans. Now, as you can see, I've also got the chat now will show up on the video stream. So hopefully I will notice that. But again, I'm not watching that. I'm not actually watching the video output of me. And if I was, it would simply be too small for me able to read what pops up there. But that is a reflection of one of the chats I am monitoring. So feel free to reach out. Again, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. Those are the best ways. If you reach out via the other ways, I will eventually get your messages, but I won't be able to probably respond to them during the stream because I won't be aware of them. So, but welcome to it, everyone. It is February 18th, and as we always do on the third Saturday of the month, we are talking real estate in South Valley, which includes, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. And we like to compare that to Santa Clara County. So we cover all the data. We get that 10,000-foot view. We take a look at what's going on in the county. And then we also compare that to the places where we love to live. So welcome to it. If you have any questions or observations or things that you'd like to throw out there, maybe you've come across some interesting local news or national news that you think affects all of us, feel free to share that in the chat, and I'll share it with everyone else here. So let's go ahead and what else? Do we need to take care of anything else before we get going? If you would like to take advantage of any of the tools I offer to my buyers and sellers, again, I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Southern Silicon Valley in the South Valley area, and I am happy to help you with your buying and selling needs. Feel free to head on over to soldbyrobert.com. And right there on the front page, I get right to the good stuff, are the tools for you to get an instant value estimate of your home, and also for you to start your search if you're a buyer. So it's all right there above the fold, first thing things that you'll see. I've also got, not things I'm not currently really advertising on the site that I'm doing that I think are kind of cool. I've got a new alerts system I started to subscribe to, and it's kind of amazing. So what it could be is anything. It could be multifamilies. It's almost like you're subscribing to a search, but it's less about the search and more about an awareness right? So if you want to subscribe to one of those for communities you're specifically interested in, the cool thing is it'll also alert you with price drops, price increases, all that kind of thing. So you can get a vibe, you can get a feeling for what's going on in the various markets. So feel free to check that out as well. And then I can also sign you up for what I think is the most amazing home value estimate service I have found yet. For those of you who have worked with me and are on my list of folks I do this for, you know that every couple of years I change it because I'm just not satisfied with the usefulness of it. And I have finally found one that is freaking amazing. So I'm in the process of transitioning over to that. And for those of you who reach out to me now, I can set you up with that and have you be sort of the first folks in the queue for that, because it's pretty amazing. It'll let you do all sorts of planning stuff. It lets you do financial goal setting. It's amazing. It's really cool, and it'll turn you on to lending opportunities, to refinance opportunities. It'll keep you up to date on what's going on, and it also is one of those scenarios where I'm partnered with a lender who is also able to provide you with information as well. So it's a really good all around help you get a handle not only on the value of your home at any given time, any given month, but also to see the financial landscape surrounding your home and understanding your financial options. So it's great. It's a great tool. Anyway, sorry, I kind of went off on the weeds a little bit on that one. But let's go ahead now and take a look at the numbers. Now, this is the total homes on the market. And as I mentioned before, we're comparing Santa Clara County with San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy, just because we want to get that 10,000 foot view, but also because I start at the county level because of the numbers involved, right? Statistics is an interesting game where the smaller the sample, the less reliable is the data in order for you to draw any real solid conclusions, right? So at the Santa Clara County level, we've got thousands of homes with things happening to them, right? So the larger the number, the better it is to realistically or reliably discover a trend, see what sort of countywide trend might be going on. And as soon as you go down more and more in terms of amount of data points, which is the number of homes on the market or the number of homes listed, those types of things, it's harder to make decisions based on that. And it's typically reflected in weird fluctuations in data because one house that sells for a crazy amount of money can really throw off, say, the average sales price for an area. So as part of these numbers, I like to try and correct for that. So when I see numbers that look funky, I'll go and look at the specifics and get a feeling for that. So we'll cover that as we go through here. But as always, we're comparing January of 2023 to January of 2022. And the reason for that is we want to eliminate any seasonal influences. We'll also look back chronologically, right, over the months that led up to January of 2023 in a later slide. But this is really just an opportunity for us to say, okay, comparing January to January, where are we at? And that's the best way for you to draw decent conclusions, or in terms of understanding where things are going now versus where they were a year ago. Does that make sense? I hope so. So, total homes on the market. So think of this as the number of homes buyers have to choose from, or the number of homes that sellers have to compete with out there in the marketplace. And we can see that in Santa Clara County, that number is up 44% from last year. Last year, we were at 704 homes on the market. This year, we're at 1,011 homes in January. So substantial increase there. In San Jose, a 37% increase, 347 homes last year, 476 homes this year. In Morgan Hill, 32 homes last year, 57 homes this year for a 78% increase. And in Gilroy, 36 last year, 55 this year for a 53% increase. So, and this is kind of this is a good example of the bigger the number of data points you have, the more reliable you can get. You might come to some big conclusions if all you saw was that in Morgan Hill, it was 78% higher, and in Gilroy, it was only 53% higher. But when you actually look at those numbers, they're not that far apart. They're definitely well within a margin of error in terms of just the number of homes that are on the market. So that's a factor of the low sample size, right? Okay. Next, let's look at, I believe this one is new listings. So these are folks who decided to put their home on the market in the month of January in 2023 versus 2022. And this is something I've been trying to get a handle on. I talk to folks who are considering listing their homes, and are hemming and hawing about it. And some of them are hesitant because, and it's very interesting, particularly over the last month or two, and folks I've talked to, it's, well, I kind of feel like I've missed the high point. I don't have to sell now, so maybe I wait until the market improves. That's one. Another is a concern that's existed now for a couple of months, which is, well, I don't plan on moving out of the state, so I'd have to buy something locally, and I feel like prices are still a little bit bloated. And I'll have conversations with some sellers. Well, if you can if you believe that the market's going to continue to decline, and I believe it is, and so do and as we'll discover later, the folks at Fannie Mae sure think it's going to, then this is obviously a much bigger pain in the butt, but sell your home and then rent for 6 months and then buy a house when the markets come down further. That's an option that I've had some people exercise a couple times over the last few years. But it is, again, it's a big pain in the butt, but it can save you big thousands of dollars. So, all right, so let's go ahead and take a look. In terms of new listings, sellers that decided to sell their home and listed it, put it on the market in January of 2023. We can see that this year it's down 27%. So we had 849 homes added to the market this year versus 1,170 were added at the same time last year. And remember, we are still in this scenario where today is very different from a year ago. Interest rates were still very low in January of 2022. The market was still pretty crazy in 2022 in January. So, and we're not going to start to see the same sort of icky market, very technical term, the icky market, until we're looking at March to March, right? March is when things started to first get hit, and we won't really be looking until April, right? Because there's also a lag time, because a home that sells actually didn't sell in the month that we tell you it sold. It sold in the month prior when the contract was signed, really, because the terms and conditions were agreed upon 30 to 45 days earlier, because it takes that long for escrow to close, right? All right, I hope I'm not throwing too much at you to start. I've had coffee, and I was already pretty in a good mood this morning, so obviously the energy levels are a little higher than maybe is good for presentation mode. All right, next, San Jose down 26% with 440 homes added on the market. 592 were added last year. In Morgan Hill, plus 9%. So we actually have an increase in the number of homes added to the market. 33 last year, 36 this year. Again, we talked about built-in inaccuracies of low sample size. I realize that's a plus 9% number, but I'd call it a wash. I'd say it's about even with last year. We're only talking about three homes here. In Gilroy, down 25%. 52 homes were listed last year. 39 homes were listed this year. Morgan Hill's in an interesting position, too, which we can talk about in a few minutes. Morgan Hill is one of those communities where sellers were like, I want this amount for my house. and we're listing homes at expected levels that were super high. And now we're seeing that sort of softening. But I also get a feeling from folks I talk about that are inside the city limits of Morgan Hill or have a Morgan Hill address that they want to hit while the iron's hot. And while they may have missed the full hotness of the iron, they're still seeing that Morgan Hill's still pretty resilient market right now in some ways. So they want to move now. So that's one dynamic I'm kind of seeing. Okay. Next on the hit list for us today is going to be the total number of homes sold. And what's interesting here is, you know what, let me pull up one more thing here that I wanted to use so I could give you some interesting side data. And you know what, let's get rid of my ugly face because it's in front of stuff. Okay, so I have those extra numbers I want to share with you. This is an interesting one, and I've been spending a little bit more time on it because I really wanted to get a handle on comparing the number of homes that were listed versus the number of homes that were sold. So let's go through these real quickly. We'll go through just the numbers, and then we'll talk a little bit. Or maybe we'll do it on an each community basis. So let's start with Santa Clara County. Total number of homes sold down 45% from the same time last year. So in January of 2022, 763 homes sold in Santa Clara County total. In January of 2023, that number was 418. That's a difference of 431 homes. So that's a pretty big number, right? I mean, we have lost more number in sales than we've actually sold, right? So we had a couple of months at the end of 2022 where we were seeing more homes listed than sold, which was an interesting trend, right? If you watched the October and November coffee and real estates, you know that we were seeing those numbers. And I was, if that continued, I was saying we'd be slowly chewing away at this inventory and get things back down to more competitive levels. But then this completely changed around. So the last couple of months, I think last month we had one area where the number of homes sold exceeded the number of new listings, but that was a flash in the pan. And we're no longer seeing those months where all the communities that we check have seen more homes sell than were listed. So let's move on to San Jose. So last year, San Jose saw 429 homes sold. This year, 217 homes sold for a drop of 49%. That's 223 fewer homes that sold in San Jose. In Morgan Hill, down 69%. We had 39 homes sell last year, 12 sold this year. In Gilroy, down 30%, 27 homes sold last year, 19 homes sold this year. And so that was 24 fewer homes in Morgan Hill and 20 fewer homes in Gilroy. Gilroy is also interesting because Morgan Hill and Gilroy have this weird, they remind me of my twins, right? So I have twin sons. And they couldn't be more different. They are absolutely different. Despite having spent 9 months together locked up inside the same person, they are very different, almost 180s from each other. Morgan Hill and Gilroy are like that in terms of how they're grokking the new real estate market. Morgan Hill has just been stamping its foot saying, I'm not going to change my price. And Gilroy seemed to get the memo earlier than everybody else and was responding appropriately in terms of when they were coming on the market, they weren't priced way out of whack compared to what homes' average sales price was at that time. And they were seeing homes that were priced incorrect were tending to get reduced pretty quick. And we've got price reduction data here too. I was thinking it wasn't going to be done in time. They'd only release it like after the third week for the previous month. So like it just came out literally yesterday. So we were able to check it out for today's presentation. All right, next. Let's take a look at list price. Now, this is the original list price. Original list price I do differently. Most agents don't report original list price, but I like this slide to be an opportunity for you to get inside the heads of sellers. So original list price means this is the price that was on the listing agreement when they signed it. It was the very first number that was entered into the MLS when the home listed. If the home had an increase in price over the course of the time that it was being marketed or a reduction in price, that is not reflected in these numbers. Why? I want you to understand the mindset of sellers. Overall, were sellers too optimistic or were they not optimistic enough? Particularly when we compare this to the average sales price in the same month, right? So these are homes that went on the MLS in January of 2023 compared to January of 2022. So let's go ahead and look at these numbers. The county numbers overall. So we see that on average, sellers expect 12% more for their home this year than they did last year, with an average list price of $1,796,892. Last year, that number was $1,599,342. So clearly expectations are higher, right? We're going to, as we get further, this gets a little bit more interesting. So San Jose, plus 5%. This year, $1,318,796 was the number. Last year, it was $1,257,606. Okay, now, and this is the first time this has happened in a while for Morgan Hill. This year, Morgan Hill was listing homes for $1,389,470 on average, which is 4% less than the same time last year, which was $1,453,845. Now, keep in mind that this is also a factor of, was there a lopsided listing of homes that tended to be at the lower end? But then we're also seeing prices tending to migrate down. In fact, if you're looking to buy homes that are at the luxury level, we're seeing amazing price drops at that price point, to the tune of, we had one last month that was what? It had a $2 million price reduction. That's still, I mean, it was still going to be a $4 million house, but a $2 million discount's nothing to sneeze at, right? If you happen to have $4 or $5 million burning a hole in your pocket. Now let's go ahead and look at Gilroy again. And this has been a trend in Gilroy. Gilroy was one of the first areas that saw very reasonable expectations on the part of the sellers when they were listing their homes. So this year, $1,238,428 is the average list price, original list price for homes in Gilroy compared to last year's. Oh, I'm sorry, it's up 2%. I put a negative there. That's wrong. Last year it was $1,210,550. Let me just verify that that number is in fact correct. Yes, it was. I have it on the non-pretty graphic side. It was 2.3%, which I rounded down to 2%, but it was supposed to be a positive, not a negative. I apologize. At least we caught it. At least I wasn't dumb enough to just keep rolling right along with that number being incorrect. So, but still, again, given sample size, very reasonable, very much a wash, right? I would definitely not call that, oh, look, we've got them still thinking they should be getting 2% more. Given the low sample size of homes that were listed, because remember how many homes were listed in Gilroy? 39 homes, right? So that can be easily nudged up and down pretty easily with just one home being priced very high or very low. So I would definitely call that a wash. So expectations really haven't accelerated from the same time last year. Next, this is average sales price. So let's make sure we're grokking where we're at here. This is another scenario where in every case, we've got a decline in sales price. In Santa Clara County, it was down 1%. And remember, expectations were up 12% in Santa Clara County, right? So sellers were calibrated to a sales price that was 12% higher than the same time last year. But in reality, in that same month, we saw average sales prices drop by 1%. So this year it's $1,638,302 in Santa Clara County. Last year at the same time, $1,658,200. So a little bit of a disconnect. Not as bad as it's Santa Clara County overall is clearly not as calibrated as some of these communities that we call home. But man, it was the difference last month really bad. We had some that were literally 30, 40% deltas between expectations and what was actually happening in the marketplace in that month. So this is good to see in terms of sellers getting more calibrated or in terms of the numbers we saw for list price, but then also seeing, at least in some of our communities, the gap has closed, right? Still a little bit out of whack in some areas, but the gap has closed. All right, San Jose down 3%. With the average sales price being $1,299,041. Last year, that was $1,343,338. Morgan Hill's down 9%. This year, $1,266,966. Last year, $1,391,020 dues. So, it's Morgan Hill, original last price was down 4%. Average sales price was down 9%. That is way more in line with reality than what we were seeing from Morgan Hill just a month or two ago, where I think one month we had sellers were listing at 20% more than the previous year, and then the next month it was like 30% more than the previous year. It was crazy. So we were seeing some outrageous numbers. So good to see this calibrating. Interestingly enough, Gilroy saw the biggest drop, 20%. This year, they have dropped in this month of January below $1 million in terms of average sales price for $985,360, where last year it was $1,228,325. And again, some of this is sample size, but the reality is buying is happening at lower price points in Gilroy. I still see homes coming on the market in Gilroy that just at first blush, clearly not listed at an appropriate price if they want to get that thing sold anytime soon. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this. Next, let's take a look at percent over and under asking price. Now this, just as we were using the original list price as an opportunity to calibrate ourselves to the mindset of sellers, this is the slide where we calibrate ourselves to the mindset of buyers, right? Because percent of asking price is related to the price at the time the offer was made. So if the original list price got changed over the amount of time that the thing was being marketed, this represents the relationship between what we offered and that was accepted versus what the price was at the time we bought the home, right? Does that make sense? So it's just a way for us to see how much below asking price on average, how competitive is it, what are buyers' mindsets in terms of offers they're putting out there that are being accepted. And this is a good representation of that. Now, in terms of the Santa Clara County overall, we have an 11.6% decrease from the same time last year. Last year, homes were selling for about 110.6% above asking price, which basically boils down to 10.6% over asking price on average you were getting, which in and of itself is insane. Now it's 99%. So 1% below asking price, which carries with it a lot of implications, right? We're not seeing as many multiple offers overall in the county. And also, since we're going to see here in a minute, days on market is reflecting having to wait longer for properties to get sold or get an accepted offer. Next, let's go ahead and look at San Jose. Last year, 110.9%. So in San Jose, just the city of San Jose, they were tending to get 10.9% over asking, and now they're getting 99%. That's an 11.9% delta from the same time last year. Morgan Hill down 10.1%. Last year it was at 107%. This year it's at 96.9%. So that's 3.1% below asking price in Morgan Hill on average. That's, again, a 10.1% change from the same time last year, losing 10.1%. In Gilroy, last year, 106.6%. This year, 99.3%. And this is a reflection, I think, of the fact that Gilroy was more calibrated to pricing. I don't think this should be an indication that there's a disconnect between Morgan Hill and Gilroy relating to, Morgan Hill is being forced to take even less. But let's keep in mind, Morgan Hill is already hundreds of thousands of dollars higher than Gilroy, and Gilroy was more reasonably priced for the current realities of the marketplace, while Morgan Hill was not. So I think that's why we're seeing them getting 99.3% of their asking price, which is less than a 1% drop, right? A 0.7% drop. But it's down 7.3% from the same time last year. Now let's go ahead and take a look at days on market. And we can see pretty dramatic increases, right? And this isn't a surprise. And again, the trend over time is going to be an interesting one to look at as well. Santa Clara County up 106%. And again, all of these numbers, all of these green numbers here for what it was last year aren't even real numbers, right? These are numbers that were artificially created by the agents that listed the house by having a listing where they put into it, we're not going to look at offers until such and such a date. This was something I did. This was something every agent did. Frankly, if you were doing a good job for your clients, every agent was doing this. Let's go ahead and punctuate that with a little coffee. Because you wanted to let the property age appropriately on the market so that enough buyers could see it to generate that interest so that you could have multiple offers. That was always the goal. So I know for mine, I liked to get 2 weekends of open houses. Really depended on the mindset of my sellers and what they wanted to do. But particularly since in a lot of cases, you needed to have a very controlled environment for showings, and an open house was sometimes easier to do it than actually scheduling. But it ended up working out well and that's what these numbers reflect, right? So anywhere from 10 to 16, 17 days would be the amount of delay that an agent would typically put. If you listed it on such and such a day, you'd add, 10 to 20 days, and that's what you put into the listing as we won't look at offers until this date and time. Santa Clara County, 17 days last year, 35 days this year for 106% increase overall. So that's the county on average. All the communities that we're looking at locally had even bigger jumps in the total number of sales time. So 15 days in San Jose last year, 34 days this year. That's 127% increase, but still lower than the overall numbers for the county simply because it had lower numbers for last year. This year for Morgan Hill was 48 days on the market. And just so that we calibrate ourselves, I know I've talked about this before in past shows and also in podcasts, but for me, 30 days is the magic number. And what makes that a magic number? Psychologically, in their heads, I believe sellers, a switch will flip in a seller's head when their home has been on the market for 30 days and it has not sold. Now, as I've said before, if you're doing this right as a seller or an agent for a seller, if you haven't gotten an offer or serious attention or enough showings within a week or two of listing the property, you need to have conversations about your pricing. And because we are chasing a declining market, it's important to price correctly now. The old adage of you can always reduce your price is absolutely true, but it is absolutely a never-ending cycle of losing money for sellers. If you pick the right price today and sell it today, you're going to sell it for more than what it would sell for 30 days from now because the market will have gone down in 30 days. So price correctly now. If you're not seeing action in 1 or 2 weeks, don't wait a month. Consider making changes to your strategy, and odds are the main strategy is pricing to get your home more attention. That's just a reality. And make sure you're working with your agent to pay attention to price banding. Price banding is a weird thing where you would expect simply as prices get lower, activity increases in terms of number of offers being put in. But if you weight it in terms of how many homes are in those bands and all these other kinds of things, sometimes you can identify a band in the middle of 2 bands that has a odd jump in the amount of activity in terms of buyers making offers on those homes. And if you're just above or just below that band, you might be missing out on the attention of buyers that would potentially be interested in your home. So if you're above that band, just above it, consider dropping into that band. And even if you're priced below that band, if you raise I've even had scenarios, I wouldn't suggest it in today's market, but I've had scenarios in the past where I raised the price into a more active price band and suddenly the home sold. It was ridiculous. But anyway, I don't think price increases are a good look right now. And there are some homes where price increases still happen. And I'm always confused by that because typically when I review those homes later, they're still on the market and they've been on the market for weeks and weeks. But anyway, where were we? Okay. Days on market. We already talked about San Jose. Morgan Hill, 48 days. So way past that 30-day mark. 14 days last year. So that's a 243% increase in the total days on market to get a home sold in Morgan Hill, which has got to be freaking out some sellers out there, right? And then, of course, Gilroy. And I think these numbers are absolutely a factor of the fact that the Gilroy real estate community, in terms of sellers being calibrated, was faster on the draw than these other communities, which is why they're selling in 32 days now versus 10 last year, which is a 220% increase, but still fewer days than every other specific community we're talking about, right? It's beating the county, it's beating San Jose, and it's beating Morgan Hill in terms of days. And I think it's because they were more calibrated. Buyers are finding prices that make more sense in Gilroy than these other communities, right? So there's that. Next, let's look back at the chart for total active listings, new listings, and homes sold. And now we're looking over our shoulder, right? We're not looking at January of last year versus January of this year. This is the total number of active listings. We've had an interesting increase from December to January. And you can see we always have an interesting jump between December and January. We had one in 2020. We had one in 2021. In terms of just December to January. And we will have one now. What is interesting? What is the interesting difference? Not as much, right? Look at how not steep that graph is for December of 2022 to January of 2023. If we take a look at this, we can see what kind of slope we've got. Look at this one. Look at that jump. That was a dramatic increase, right? That showed a complete change in direction. This one was also more mild, but to my eye, it's maybe about the same between 2020 and 2021. It looks like about the same amount of movement in terms of slope. But definitely, we are, compared to last year, experiencing a pretty big slowdown in terms of total number of active listings, the total inventory. That's actually, in this case, a good thing, right? Because as we add more and more, last year people were obviously doing more profit taking. We were seeing the increase in the inventory. Now we're seeing the number of active listings not jumping as much. Next, new listings. Really interesting data on new listings with as much of a dramatic uptick as we saw last year. So that indicates that since we saw a more mild amount of total inventory, we can expect to see with this dramatic increase in listings and see if it pans out. Now we can see last year that dramatic increase proceeded all the way up to March, where we peaked at March last year. And we also had a peak in March of 2021 with sort of a weird up and down March, April, May timeframe, then June, and then started to decline after June, which kind of makes sense, right? That's the pre-summer months. That's when everybody's getting ready for that big sales time in the summer. But what's interesting about last year is we had that peak in March, and it just steadily declined straight on from March all the way till December, which is a little bit unusual. Interesting to see what happens here. We've obviously got a lot of folks who are putting their homes on the market compared to what is happening in today's market, right? Obviously, the numbers are still depressed from the same time last year, but overall, relative to what's happening in the rest of the market right now, that's a pretty dramatic increase. And in terms of homes sold, this number always lags 30 days, right? Because remember, a home that sells actually had an accepted offer in the previous month. So while we're seeing, and you tend to see that every time, right? We saw in 2020 it happened. In 2021 it happened. In 2022 it happened. In 2023 we see that the home sold drops. And what's interesting is when that number goes below the new listings, and we can see it was below the new listings last time, or excuse me, in 2020 and 2021. Interesting to see that it's sort of gone that way here too. But we should expect to see, with the increase in inventory, some sort of an increase in the number of homes sold in the following months. And it should peak, if we can judge by past markets at all, in March, April, right? Last year it was April. The year before that it was June, April, May, June. So let's see where things go. But my feeling is that we will see a less pronounced increase in that number in terms of the number of homes sold. It will be a little bit more mild, resulting in a continued accumulation of inventory. Does that make sense? If you disagree, let me know. I'd love to hear other theories, but I honestly think that's probably where we're heading with this. Next, let's take a look at Santa Clara County list price versus sales price. The green line is list price. The darker green line is average sales price. So we can see the trend here. These two lines moved away from each other in July of 2022, and average list price has been above sales price on a continual basis here, with really sort of mirroring each other's movements, except for that July, August, September timeframe where they went away from each other pretty dramatically and then sort of came back together, and they've been sort of shadowing each other, with sales price continuing to hover just below. But what's interesting is the gap closes a little bit in January of 2023 compared to the same time last year, which is an interesting trend. So we'll see how that goes. We would expect the market to heat up in February, March, because that's what we've seen in past years, right? If we look at January, February, March of last year, we can see that average sales price started to go over list price there for a while in that time period. But then once we really got into the year, they started to be very close to each other and then moved away from each other, as I mentioned, in July. And we can pretty much hang that on interest rates, right? Next, while this is happening, let's go for a little caffeine infusion here. Now, there is no difficulty spotting the trend here. This is percent of asking price, where we peaked in March of 2022 and just steadily declined from there. We sort of flattened out a little bit over the last few months, where we were hovering between 99.9 and 99%. 98.8% and 99%, or 99.9. So definitely fluctuating around that point, just below asking price. In terms of trends, I would expect us to continue to see below asking price sales. But let's look at other Januaries, where in general, if we just look at it relative to the months around it, right? Last year in January, we saw an increase of 0.7 between December and January. And the year prior to that, I don't have the December numbers up there, but it was 102. I would wager that's higher than what it was in December of 2020. My guess is we may see the gap close. We may even see things going much closer to 100%, or maybe just over 100%, simply because seasonally that's what tends to happen. But given what we've had happen in terms of accumulation of inventory, we'd have to have a pretty big jump in buyer demand, and I'm just not seeing that happening in interest rates. Interest rates have actually gone up, and we've seen some interesting things as a result of that. So not really expecting that to be the case here. Next, days on market. Again, not hard to spot the trend here. Absolutely on its way up ever since April of 2022. And absolutely another factor of interest rates going up. So we had interest rates jump. The days of below 3% interest mortgage rates went away, and this is sort of what the net result has been. And it just, I don't see this changing. I see this either maybe flattening a little bit, but I don't see these numbers. I don't see days on market dropping anytime soon. Next, percent of listings with reduced prices in Santa Clara County. Last month, it was 34.4. This month, it's 23.4. So a big drop overall in the number of homes with a reduced list price. And this is something we want to watch, because as the number drops, that tends to reflect either folks that are in denial and they're just refusing to reduce their prices, which we can potentially see in other numbers and get some clues from, particularly when we're looking at things like original list price, right? How out of whack are those original list prices? But this number should go down as folks who have homes on the market in the existing inventory adjust their prices. And of course, as they adjust their prices and they get sold, the number of homes that are then reducing their prices decreased, because hopefully the homes that are coming on the market more recently have already been calibrated to the right pricing, so they don't need to get their price dropped, right? So it is normal to expect these numbers to go down. Last month, it was 38.8% for San Jose. This month, 26.8%. In Morgan Hill, it was 38.5%, now down to 30.4% in Morgan Hill. Gilroy last month was 34.2%, and this month, 31.4%. All of that very much expected. I'm not at all surprised by how close last month's and this month's Gilroy numbers are, because again, it's another indicator of how Gilroy got the message earlier than a lot of other communities in terms of what should be happening with pricing. All right, so that is it for the kind of head down view of the markets. I've also got some interesting items to cover relating to the local marketplace. We've got 20 more minutes left until we hit 11 o'clock. And just for those of you watching, I can see I've got a few folks watching right now on other platforms. I've got one on Facebook, a couple on YouTube, 2 on, I think that's Twitch. Is that Twitch? So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But I've got some nice local stuff we can talk about. And if we end up hitting a topic that's super interesting to everyone and we go beyond 11 o'clock, I'm totally cool with that. I don't have anything I have to do until 1. So I've got a nice big open spot in my schedule for today if needed. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the new news items that came across here. And we're going to start with something just focused on local stuff here in Morgan Hill. Morgan Hill, I've never heard of this place before, but apparently there is a restaurant called Raising Cane's, and they're going to be building a place on, I believe, Butterfield and Cochran, which is 1 block away from the Chick-fil-A that's getting built. So we're getting a lot of chicken restaurants or chicken fast food joints in Morgan Hill all of a sudden. But the Planning Commission offered input on design concepts at the February 14th meeting. So I'm always a fan of expansion in terms of business in Morgan Hill. I like to see that. It's more options, I think, is good. More employment opportunities is good. So, and these will be great for, first jobs that folks have had either right out of high school or having them during high school. So I'm all for that, but it's just interesting to see things evolving here in Morgan Hill. And if we take a look at where that's going to be, it's going to be right here. That's the location. It's going to be on the corner of Butterfield and Cochran, and they're on the southeast corner. So that's that guy. And what's interesting is this is where the Chick-fil-A is going to be. So you can choose between Chick-fil-A or Cane's, one of those two places for your chicken experience here in Morgan Hill if you are so motivated. So feel free to take advantage of that. Next, I wanted to hit what are interest rates. And so to use an example, again, sort of taking a cue from what's going on in Morgan Hill, I put in Morgan Hill as the location, and I've got 1.3 million because that's the average price. I think the average price in Morgan Hill was 1.266, but I go ahead and put 1.3. What are the interest rates and what would your mortgage payment be? Just insane. Take a look at those fees. So The lowest monthly payment is from PenFed Credit Union. And let me strongly suggest that you talk to, if you're looking to get a mortgage, you absolutely should be shopping. You should be talking to the bank you're currently banking with. You could be talking to a credit union. You should be talking to a direct lender. You should be talking to a loan broker. Just find out what products you have out there, because literally this is a product, right? They are renting you money. And just like anything else, different terms and conditions are going to apply, and you can find yourself a much better deal if you invest some time to try and dig those deals up. What's interesting is the low number of options that are provided here. I find it interesting that I'm only seeing 2 banks featured here. In past years, I would have seen a dozen. So it's interesting that this is where it's at. But we're talking about 6%, 6.33, 5.9 for interest rates. But check out the fees. $9,148, $10,095. Those are huge fees. And it wasn't too long ago, fees were $0 for these kinds of loans. So that's another interesting one. As we start to go national, looming recession and housing market correction on the table in 2023. But that's not me saying it. There are a few caveats according to Fannie Mae forecasters who expect the road to a housing market recovery will make its way through a recession. So we have, and this is something I did a podcast a month ago, 2 months ago on this subject, where we talked about Fannie Mae forecasting bad stuff. They include projections of price declines, dips in home sales, and a mild recession sometime in the first half of 2023. And if we all remember who Fannie Mae is, they were one of the architects of the downturn in 2007 and 8, meaning they played a part in the securitization of subprime loans, right? Creating investment instruments based on that stuff. And they are not an organization that tends to lean into bad news. If they're going to tell you something like this, it's going to be soft pedaled as much as possible. At least historically, that's what I've seen. So when they tell you, quote, a mild recession, you might want to be prepared for something slightly more than a mild recession. So just something else to calibrate. And these are things they're saying out in the open. This wasn't some, secret camera recording of these folks. This is them actually saying it. And it's interesting that they're willing to say it. And here's some interesting numbers they're throwing out. Home sales are expected to drop by more than 21% this year. And of course, we're seeing that number being even bigger in our local markets, right? We've already sort of talked about home sales dropping, again, 45% in the county, 50% in San Jose, 69% in Morgan Hill, 30% in Gilroy. So 21% nationally. We are clearly in every way, in every community, seeing a much bigger drop in our local markets. Despite the decline, forecasters, i.e. the people at Fannie Mae, anticipate a rebound by the end of next year with sales climbing 12.8%. I'm not as convinced of that. I think one of the linchpins is, because remember, we've got this weird dichotomy where in order to fight inflation, you need to increase interest rates. But in order to fight recession, you need to reduce interest rates. So I think this is based on some theory that this mild recession gets dealt with, or the inflation gets dealt with soon enough that we're able to reduce interest rates so that then the mild recession gets fixed by the end of the year. And I think that's a super optimistic point of view. If any of you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. For those of you, I've got now a couple of more folks. I think that's on YouTube. Unfortunately, it's mixing the numbers between Twitch and YouTube, so I don't know where you are. But if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment about that, feel free to throw it in there. I'd love to get your thoughts. Next, price tags for homes are expected to drop 4.2% by the end of the year, followed by 2.3% more in 2024. Fannie Mae had initially anticipated a milder dip. And I would say, given that may be true nationally, right? Maybe that's not a completely disconnected from reality estimation. Our numbers will be far bigger than that, just because our numbers have been far bigger for everything else. And how they can come up with, if you're ballparking something, throwing out 4%, 5%, 6%. Anyone who's ballparking something that is literally a year away, in some cases more than a year away, that uses estimates like 2.3%, I'm a little sus. I get a little sus over that kind of precision on an estimate, right? So they expect a 4.2 drop by the end of the year, end of 2023, followed by another drop of 2.3 in 2024. So they're expecting drops for the next 2 years. So I don't know how that mixes with dealing with a mild recession, right? Because they're leaning into this idea that a mild recession will come and be dealt with, but it looks like they're expecting 2024 to still have decreases. Fannie Mae is expecting an overall reduction of about 10% in the average home price over the next 2 years. Maybe nationally. Here, I think we'll see a bigger drop. With the supply of existing homes for sale still tight, and let's think back to our supply. We have a relatively large supply compared to previous years, right? Inventory is up. Total number of homes on the market up 43% from the same time last year in the county. Next, Fannie Mae forecasters project rates to dip to just above 6% by the end of 2023 and about 5.5% in 2024. And I believe that is directly linked to their theory that inflation goes away and we're now focused on recession. But also keep in mind, remember, what we've seen over the last few months absolutely brings home the point that the prime rate is not directly linked to mortgage rates, right? Because while they've increased the prime rate every single time they could, they were doing it by 0.5, they did it by a quarter point the last time they did it, we have seen mortgage rates go down, right? Well, and that happened because of 10-year treasuries, because that's what it's more linked to, not so much the prime rate. But psychologically, the prime rate's absolutely there. And of course, the prime rate can affect treasury notes that are out there. So there is an influence, but it's not directly connected to it. All right, I think that was all I had from this article. So let's jump on to the next. This one is housing starts slow in January, multifamily construction surges. Now, I kind of like this from the standpoint of, I think multifamily is awesome. When I'm talking to buyers today, one of the first things I'll ask them is, are you willing to do a little house hacking? Meaning you buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quad, and then live in one and rent out the others. And it's usually a concept that's a little foreign to them, and they're a little intimidated by it sometimes. But it can be an awesome way to really make things work out well for you. Primarily because if you get a duplex that on one side has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and the other side has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, where you're only sharing one wall, which is equivalent to a townhome, right? And many townhomes you're sharing 2 walls because you're in the middle. This you're not. You're just sharing one wall. You're not paying twice as much for that duplex as you would if you were buying 2 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, or 2 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhomes that were right next to each other, right? You're probably paying $1.3 million or $1.4 million, which is probably only a couple of $100,000 more, $300,000 more than if you bought a single family residential 3-bedroom, 2-bath, right? So there's that. There is the more bang for the buck idea that you get out of it. And then there's the idea that you can rent that thing out. And in many cases, you can rent out one side so that it pays for your entire mortgage. Now, is that true today in Morgan Hill? No. But I love Morgan Hill duplexes. We've got an area of Morgan Hill duplexes on the west side of town that I'm always looking at. I love them. One came up. I kind of looked at it, got all excited about it, and then it sold out from under me. So I should have moved faster on that one. But I love it. I love Morgan Hill duplexes because we have a whole area of duplexes. I would love to see more duplexes get built. Unfortunately, these numbers that are national, we're not seeing a whole lot of that activity locally. I'd like to see more 2, 3, and 4 unit multis getting built. And remember, just for those of you who might have more questions about house hacking, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But you'll want to buy one that doesn't have more than 4 units. Once it goes above 4 units, you can't get the preferred owner-occupied mortgage rate, right? You have to get a investor rate. But if you're living in one of the units and it's 4 or fewer units, you can get a loan that is just like if you were buying a single-family residential home. So it's got the same benefits, same lower interest rate, same terms. It's a great deal. So check that out. And I think as we move into the next year, or moving through further into this year, more and more opportunities are going to present themselves for that kind of thing, because you're talking about a different kind of mindset. You're talking about sellers and buyers who are calibrated to math, not how I feel about the house, right? Because if it's a multi-unit, then it's all about the numbers. It's all about, does it cash flow? And so regardless of what else is going on in the marketplace, you can simply make offers saying, listen, at the price you're asking, this thing will never cash flow. Even if I rent both sides and then bring in insurance, taxes, maintenance, all these other things, would never flow. And since we're now in a market where you can arguably say values are going to go down, you can't account on appreciation to backfill that so that at some point you're able to break even, both in the value of the property or in any potential increase in rents. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. Total housing starts fell to 1.3 million units in January, 4.5% below December's revised figure, and 21.4, this is the number I really wanted you to hear, 21.4% lower than January of 2022. So year over year, we have 21% fewer housing starts. And that's nuts. That's a huge drop from the same time last year. Obviously, it's a response to a decline in the market and all that kind of stuff. But it's a creepy number to consider. New residential construction has been dropping. You can see the trend has been since April of 2022. Housing permits stayed largely flat month over month. Now, remember, permits are a leading indicator because obviously one of the best leading indicators like architectural stuff, those kinds of things. But, permits are one of the first things you got to do before you can do anything. Single family permits decreased by 1.8% compared to the previous month and by 40% compared to January of 2022. So overall, nationally, huge drop off in single family residential permits. Multifamily permits for residences with 2 to 4 units, and those are the ones that I think we care about or you might want to care about, increased by 26.1% compared to the previous month. Was hoping they'd give us the year-over-year number, but that's an interesting increase. And I think that also reflects this idea that more housing units are still needed, even though we're not seeing as much activity and it's being sort of held back by pricing and interest rates. So, all right. This is just a units under construction, single versus multi, with single family units being the darker line. And we can see that multifamily units has just sort of continued a dramatic increase while we see a drop in single family. And I don't think there's anything else out of that. But just to understand the trend, like as we look at this from today, they have literally stopped building single family residential and a decline from past months, whereas multifamily has continued to grow. That's sort of the prime takeaway here. Next, weekly housing trends. This is from Realtor.com, and I like to look at just sort of the summary here. That this is a nice, interesting summary. Median listing prices up 7.9%. So again, nationally, and remember, if we just look at the county, we have a 12.4% increase in the county. This is a 7.9% increase in the listing prices. New listings is down 13%. We had a 26% drop in new listings, so twice the drop. And active listings were up 70%, and active listings for us was up 43%. So in terms of the number of active listings increasing, we didn't even hit the national average. Time on market, 23 days slower, and we actually beat that locally as well. If you sort of look at these year-to-date numbers, 16 days slower, plus 69% active listings, down 9% on new listings, up 7.9% on listing prices. And then this is sort of week to week, January, February, up to the 11th. Next, let's take a look at opportunity zones. This is one I just wanted to throw out there because I thought it was interesting to note how far away all these places are from us. This is the ATTOM top 10 opportunity zones with lowest median home prices. California is not represented at all, and I do not see a single West Coast or west of the Mississippi kind of thing. We've got Illinois, Michigan, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Virginia, Kentucky, all as the leading opportunity zones in terms of pricing. And I know for folks locally, I have some folks I talk to who don't really have a problem with potentially investing way away and having it remote since they'll hire someone locally to manage it. But, I tend to focus more on stuff that's a little bit more local, either in-state or bordering California, just so it's easier for you to get to it in case you want to do something with it or need to do something with it. Next, what was this one? Foreclosure activity continues to increase. This is a creepy one. It is one of those things that's kind of an indicator here. And this is both, in terms of activity, this is notifications, notice of default, those types of things, which are all leading indicators, right, of bad market things. January up 2% from last month and 36% from a year ago. So month over month, foreclosure filings were up between December and January by 2%. From the same time last year, 36%. And you're not seeing this in headlines anywhere. And this seems like a headline kind of number that folks would want to share. And wait till we get to the bottom of this one, and you'll see some interesting data relating to California, how California's figuring into this, which may spell opportunity for folks who are willing to dive into foreclosure stuff. Counter to the national trend, only 3 states with 100 or more REOs saw an annual increase, including New York, Pennsylvania, and California. We were up 4%. Major metro areas with a population greater than 200,000 that saw the greatest number of REOs, Riverside, California, is in that top list. With interesting, Detroit. I know nothing about Detroit, and I would not do anything in Detroit. I wouldn't do anything in Chicago. I wouldn't do anything in New York. Philadelphia. The only thing I get from these communities is the articles that I read about crime and other horrible things happening in these areas. Among the 223 metro areas with a population of at least 200,000, those with the highest foreclosure rates, Bakersfield, number 2. One in every 1,522 homes in Bakersfield. Other than Cleveland and Detroit, among the metro areas with a population greater than 1 million, those with the worst foreclosure rates were Chicago was number 1, Riverside was number 2, at 1 in every 2,123. The states that saw the greatest number of foreclosure starts were in California, so we take the prize. California takes the prize in terms of foreclosure starts, and I believe by start they mean a notice of default, which is a notice to the owner that says you are behind on your mortgage and we are starting foreclosure proceedings, right? You need to respond by a certain date. And the fact that that's up by, what was it, 32%? Or was it 36%? 36%. That is something to pay attention to. If you have a checklist of things that you need to keep track of on a regular basis and do a quick Google search on, foreclosures would be one of them. Because that, again, is another leading indicator where we saw funky stuff happening last time, and I think this is something to keep an eye on. The uptick quote, this is from ATTOM CEO Rob Barber, and these guys are great for numbers. The uptick in overall foreclosure filings nationwide points towards a trend that may suggest more increased activity is on the horizon as we enter the new year. Absolutely agree with that. Only because that's what happens every other time that this stuff happens. Quote, while both completed foreclosures and foreclosure starts have stalled slightly over the past month, the annual increase in overall activity seen over the past 21 months may indicate a more substantial trend that could continue in 2023. And I'd be a little bit more certain in that statement to say, yeah, I think this is exactly what we can expect to see. Next, top 10 U.S. counties with the most foreclosure starts. California is number 2. Los Angeles County is number 2. Cook County, Illinois, that's Chicago. Harris County, Texas, don't know where that is. And I'm surprised Texas is even on this list, and it's actually more than once. It's actually 3 times. Bexar County and Dallas County. Not surprised Philadelphia is there. Not surprised Clark County, that's Las Vegas. Riverside, obviously, we have the place of honor with 2 positions, the number 2 spot and the number 5 spot in terms of things being in California. Next, and just sort of another, and this, as we sort of move along here, we move out of the real estate stuff and into interesting tidbits that I think affect all of us. Soaring California natural gas prices could bring higher electricity bills this summer. And this was something I get notices from Nextdoor, for instance, from my local communities. And I started doing some math and realized it would be cheaper for me to heat my house by buying a cord of wood and stacking it in my backyard and burning it than it would be to continue to heat my house using natural gas. Plus, and it's doubled. I mean, the my bill last month was insane, and it, when I compared it to my consumption last year, my consumption went down, but my bill almost doubled. So ridiculous. So as of right now, in my house, everything's turned off, and except for in the bedrooms, and we're trying to just sort of weather it through that. Now, obviously, this is a story from Southern California, but this applies to the whole state. Consumer natural gas bills are up between 2 and 2.5 times what they were a year ago. I don't think I have anything else because a lot of this was LA specific. But, with everything else that's going on, increasing the cost for you to heat your home, to use natural gas is ridiculous. And there's also sort of a little war going on with the state of California against natural gas. They want to outlaw natural gas being installed in new construction. They want to get rid of natural gas altogether. And there have been jokes and memes about how evil natural gas is. People on Twitter. Natural gas is the primary reason why we were able to beat our emissions goals for global climate change. Natural gas is much better than the other alternatives. And what's really idiotic is this idea that we should get rid of those things before we have, and have everyone migrate over to electricity, right? Because if you can't heat your house with gas, you have to use electrical heat. Well, it seems to me that if you're going to try to replace something with something else, you should have the other thing at a level where it can support the new demand before you cut off the thing you want to kill. And in order for that to happen, we have to build more power plants. We have to come up with more ways to generate electricity. And between electric cars and wanting to get rid of natural gas, what the heck are people thinking? The first bills we should see coming out of Sacramento are not, let's get rid of gas. It should be, here are the 5 power plants we're going to build in order to meet the needs we claim we want to have relating to electricity. And we already live in a world where brownouts and blackouts are happening all the time, right? So I sure don't want to put more stress on that system without fixing it, improving it, and giving it a bigger framework to function than it currently has, right? Okay. Next and last on the hit parade, new census data shows where Americans are moving and where you should be investing. I think this is always interesting stuff to keep in mind. If you are an investment-minded person, or you are someone who isn't married to a certain physical location and you could live anywhere. I know I have a lot of clients that are programmers, right? And back when this was really happening, was just before COVID, and even at the very beginning of COVID, programmers were moving to Portland and to Reno and Texas and Idaho, because now the policy was you could work from wherever you want. And that's a thing. But what I thought was interesting was Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas are the leading states for population growth. California and New York both rank last as affordability continues to decline. Let's see, where did we? Okay, here we go. So net population increase, California has the highest number decrease with a 0.3% drop. So 343,230. Again, I did a podcast on this phenomenon 4 months ago. And what's interesting is, if people want to talk to a group of individuals, at least those who are paying attention, real estate agents are one of the ones to do, right? So you talk to anyone who's listed homes, and you can get some really interesting insights into what are sellers doing, right? It used to be, back in the olden days, and I've been doing this since 1988, typically 20% of sellers were moving out of the state, and 80% were moving somewhere else in California, and in many cases, not that far from the home they were selling. And a lot of times it was just a downsizing kind of a thing, right? They had a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom home, they raised their family, and now they just wanted a 2 or 3-bedroom house somewhere else. Today, that number's flipped. Now 80% of my movers, of my sellers, are leaving the state altogether and going to Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Florida. That's where folks are going. And what's interesting is the one of the ones, this is one I did a year and a half ago, 2 years. Well, I think it was before COVID, maybe not. They moved to Idaho and bought a bigger place. They took what they made on their California house, and they bought a bigger house in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. So it's not even about downsizing for some folks. For some folks, it's getting out of California. So I find that interesting. Let's see. some of the areas that saw the most population growth were Ocala, Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, Charlotte, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Houston, Texas. It is so hot in Houston. Deltona, Florida, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Huntsville, Alabama, Miami, Florida, and McAllen, Texas. Let's see. As Americans find new homes in the South and the West, they're leaving states that have high housing costs, high taxes, and or slow job growth. The states that lost the most residents in 2022 were California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. And I don't think that surprises anyone, right? And then this is a topic we have covered quite a bit. I've even used data from moving companies, right, where simply by looking at how much it costs to rent a moving truck in various areas, you can discover how many people are leaving, right? The more expensive it is to rent a truck, there's a much higher demand in that area for moving trucks. And in areas where it's cheaper to get a moving truck, that there's a surplus. There's folks moving there, so there's clearly more folks moving to that location to give a higher supply of trucks. All right, that is about it, folks. I hope that we've covered some interesting topics for you today. As always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than we take up with your time, and that's true of everything I do. Just to sort of give you a quick overview of what is next, obviously, Coffee and Real Estate will happen again next month. Over the coming week, I will do market analyses for each of the communities for Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. They'll get their own presentation, which will be a video discussing in a little bit more depth each one of those communities' stats and a little bit more insights into that, where we'll get into a little bit more nitty-gritty of the whys behind some of those numbers. So check those out. You can find them at soldbyrobert.com. They'll also be posted to YouTube. And I'm trying to come up with a workflow that easily gets these things posted to Facebook. But boy, Facebook does not make posting videos to their site easy. It is a bizarre process to upload videos. Doing something live on Facebook's ridiculously easy. Just uploading a video is from a UI standpoint, one of the stupidest experiences I've ever had with dealing with videos. But YouTube is where those will absolutely be. And of course, it's Sold by Robert. They will be there as well. So feel free to check those out. And of course, there's my weekly podcast that comes out weekly, sometimes Monday, sometimes Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday, depending on the workload and what's happening. Obviously, every day I'm doing things, not just podcasts. So I have to sort of make things fit with how I can make them fit. So you can count on those weekly, and you can find those on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Audible.com, tons and tons of different places. In fact, if you go to therebelbroker.com, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. These are some of the places you can find it. And you can click those links at the top. So Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or the RSS feed, or on YouTube. So there's the audio version where I just do the podcast. And again, iHeartRadio, I don't know. Oh, there's our iHeartRadio. I don't know why Audible isn't there. But anyway, so you can check them all out there. If you'd prefer to just play them on the website, you can do that as well. The audio version is all there, and then the YouTube version is the video version of it, where I don't know why people want to see that, but it's the same show. There's just a video of me talking and potentially showing you stuff visually as we go through the podcast. But some things, to kind of toot my own horn, I guess. Berksy rated us number 3 in 2023 in top 10 real estate podcasts for real estate. 15 best realtor podcasts 2023. That was from FeedSpot, and Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker, which is my podcast, was number 7. So yay me. And these are some of the past shows. We talked about open houses, Secret Sellers Must Know, National Rent Control 2023, 2007 Cat Crash Replay. I think those are all pretty topical shows that might benefit you and give you some information you could use moving forward. All right, that is it. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. It's beautiful out there. Get yourself out and get some sunshine. Get that vitamin D flowing through your veins. I know I'm going to go out and check out a few things. I've got some real estate stuff to do today. Maybe I'll see you out there in the world. Enjoy your coffee. Have a good Saturday. And of course, I will talk to you all next month.